Welcome back to Story Deep Dive with Rachel and Dana. This is a podcast where two book coaches, editors, and besties discuss books not as readers but as writers to draw inspiration from great books and have lots of laughs along the way. Literally tried to start recording and we were immediately laughing over nothing at all. So standard fare over here at the Story Deep Dive podcast. As always, I gotta check in with Dana to start before we dive into discussing the plot of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. And y'all, we got a lot to talk about. But first, Dana, what you got going on over at Danger Tales?
I want to say nothing. I want to say absolutely nothing because at the time of this, girl, listen, the only way you're going to ever get there is by like aspiring. But look, we're in the summer, so by the time everyone's like listening to this, summer months, and I am dedicating more time to finishing my draft that I'm still working on for my book. And I've been writing on this series for my romance, and I'm on book 3 of 3. Finally,
we're so close.
Girl, not close enough. I was like, listen, I need prayers, Twizzlers, Dr. Pepper, whatever waxy cakes, whatever you can send my way. I was just like, man, this is hard. But carving out time. I really, really, really want to have the draft done by the time we come back from our summer break.
Oh, that's
the real, like, realistic. I don't know if it's realistic, but the goal.
Yeah.
And so that's what I'm doing. I am carving out time. I have blocks on my calendar. I'm doing the thing, and I'm just consistently showing up. That's what I'm doing. Consistently showing up.
Can I ask a quick question about that?
Yes.
Because you've written many a romance series. So are you writing all 3? Because I think you said that you were going to write all 3 of them before you release. So have the whole series done. Is it because you're looking to rapid release? Are you testing something new? Like, tell me about the decision to write all 3 books first and before releasing even the first one.
Yeah. So so just in case you're new around these parts, what's up? Look, if you've been around, listen, I'm always writing something. So we're the nonfiction. That's just what it is, about romance plotting. But for the actual novels and deciding to do the series, it was a couple of reasons. One is my schedule is insane.
Yes, I can.
I know this. Listen, you know how you know something, but then when it hits your bones and you know, it was like, okay, me writing and releasing the way I would normally do is not serving me.
Yeah.
It is an energetic pull. It is an open loop that I do not need.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like I'm decent at juggling, but at the same time, I think it's a grown woman thing that I'm just like, I don't want to juggle.
Yeah. I'm not down. I don't want to juggle.
Listen, I don't even have that skill. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, and it's not even them being in final form. It's just first draft all the way through, seeing the characters. It's interconnected, not a hard like interconnection, like they do cameos, but it's enough for me to be able to see my way through it and enjoy the process. I don't know how much I'm enjoying it because I want it to be over.
Yeah.
But I can enjoy the process. And it sort of relieves that other pressure. And so it has its own set of issues that I'm noticing. Like, my team is waiting for it. I'm getting reminders, updates. Are you done yet? No, I'm not done yet. Still not done. No, I'm not done yet. So it's been interesting. And I've never wrote this way before. Yeah. I've never done it this way before. I've always wrote a book, release, and then I always sort of still knew in my mind what was coming next, but it wasn't something that I had. And I always had this goal of being the person that I was months ahead, and I'm just, girl, listen, I feel like it's overrated, but I'm just going to stick. I'm just sticking to the plan because I've committed to the plan. And I feel like me, myself, and I are going to have a long discussion when this is done.
Yeah.
But for right now, that's what it is. So it's I feel like the third book, the draft of it, and they're novella-ish length, So I'm thinking by the probably around the same time, if not a little bit after the third one would be done, so that I can go into the part that I really like, which is editing and
it's the good part.
Oh, girl, I'm just listen. And every time I think about that, I got to remember where I am, and it's like, oh my gosh, it feels like sucks for me, but it's okay.
And you also too, like, the tricky part about that is like your favorite part is the editing, and that's like when you and just you and I both are like, this is when it gets like really good. It's like when we get into editing, but that's been delayed further for you because you're like, I have to write a first draft, and then I have to write another first draft, and then I have to write, and so you stay in this extended period of time at the part that is honestly the least fun part of the process. I think like outlining is fun because the idea is fresh and you're like, oh, look at all this stuff I can do, and then first draft is where you hit the like, because again, you run into the stuff that needs to change and the stuff that like you're not as sold on in actuality. And then, but it's like after that, after you learn everything from the first draft, when you're like, this is how it becomes like the thing in my head. But you have to do the first draft 3 times in a row for 3 different, and that feels rude.
Girl, it feels like punishment, right? Like, but I didn't do anything. But here's what it is doing on a flip side that I'm appreciating, and it makes the restarts feel worth it. It is showing me how I can get in my own way during first drafts. It's also showing me how you can do a lot of cycling. Because I would normally spend more time in the plotting side so that when I'm doing my first draft, I do have a more substantial first draft. And I'm being very intentional that this is lean Dana, this is lean Dana, this is lean Dana. So whenever I get ready to do this, I am now, it's like, take a note. It's like, step away.
Keep moving.
Quit.
It's that like, gift that you're like, stop it.
Take a note, and I think, and I could be wrong, I think it's also making me sort of justify, maybe a better word, justify like what makes this book mine. Like what are the things that really, and I think I can have that discussion when all the bones are there and all of the main parts are there and in place, and that feels really good. And so I'm just, it's like, suck it up, Buttercup, and and I don't know, I just keep showing up, sitting down, keep writing, and every time we put our weekly like goals, I keep saying, I'm still writing this series. That's why I don't know how people work on book for years. I know this now at the bottom of my soul. I do not know how people do this. I would quit. I quit. Like what? I think I would. But, and it also tells me about myself of how much I do like going through the writing process. I like starting and going through the steps and writing and releasing and doing again, because the iterative process is a part of my process. So a lot of that it's like, I know it, but now I know, and I have a better sense of it. So there's a lot of good coming out of it. I know I keep saying it sucks for me, but it I'm learning to be present, and I picked a really great set of stories to do it with. So that feels good. Girl, and who knows? I'm praying it means the editing goes faster. I don't think that's what's gonna happen.
Not trying to sell yourself on that promise prematurely.
Listen, girl, because I still got one more book to go. So listen, like, girl, be quiet. You still got another book to go. Who cares? You still got another book to go. Listen. So with that said, this is the shenanigans in Dana's world. You got some stuff coming up.
Ooh, big.
Come on.
Yes, big days, big days. First of all, I'm going to put a little pin in this for the listener. So what this means, because Dana's telling us about this, it's a new process. She hasn't done this before. When she gets to the end, she's going to have a long, hard talk with herself. So that means come like the July or August episodes, we're going to need to check back in with Dana and be like, okay, now that you've been through this and you've had a good long talk with yourself, what did we come out with? So I'm putting a pin in that for all of us so that we all collectively, so if I forget, say that the July episodes come out and I forget, you can post a comment and be like, hey, we want to know what happened with Dana's process. Remind me and we will find out. So I'm just... this is becoming
pressure.
A collective project now.
No pressure.
We are all involved. So yes, this is so we have sort of two big times of year, right? It's mid-year and end of the year here at Story Cipher when we open the Academy for enrollment again, because the Academy is a 6-month long live cohort, right? Which means it's not open evergreen, and I only open it twice a year because I spend the rest of that time walking with my students through the whole process of writing a novel, making sure that they have experience with every single one of the steps so that they get to actually practice writing a full novel. So not, trying to do skills in isolation, none of that. It's like, all right, we're going to learn how to write a whole thing, which includes the first draft, which what everybody here, if you've listened to this podcast for any length of time, then but I will remind you, and if you're new here, I'm going to disabuse you of the notion that the first draft is anything other than, you gotta get through it. Like this is just the nature of the first draft. And that's one of the big, sort of myths that I work with my students on dispelling of like, I know the first draft is not what you want, it's not what you want it to be. It just never is. Because it's your first time putting the idea on paper. And so we're opening the Academy again. So for our next cohort of, we call it Nov 101, where you again walk through the whole process of writing a novel. So there's a couple of kind of like fun new things that are going into, based on student feedback and the work that we've done over the last year. Number one, I have developed a comprehensive syllabus for the program so that you can look at it and know where we are going, right? And just get that really, I have the modules all mapped out and, that stuff is like on the landing page. It's available inside the Academy, but I created a syllabus to make it really, really clear of like, here's what we're working on every month. There's so many skills that go into writing a novel. This is something that some of our students had pointed out of like, man, there's really... every month you're learning and using like a lot of skills because writing a novel requires so many. And so I took that to heart and took that seriously of like, okay, let me kind of break those down so you sort of know where your attention is focusing this month, right? So breaking that down and making it very clear of like, this is what I want you to have by the end of the month, right? And we sort of like give that nice, clear deliverable so that you're kind of accountable for each step in the process. And so that's thing number one. Thing number two is a hot new workbook for when you come into the program to help you begin developing your consistent writing practice. This is your consistent practice is one of the most important things that you can develop in your writing life. And it really, the rubber really meets the road, just like we were talking about when you hit the first draft, because that's that first real hurdle in the process where a lot of writers quit, go back to the beginning. There's all kinds of things that are going to that tend to happen at the first draft. But if you've developed a consistent writing practice, then you are butt in chair and, you are committed to solving those problems every time you show up. You've already made a habit of it so that during those first 2 months when we are brainstorming, we're developing our idea, we're outlining, you are practicing that consistent practice, working out what works for you, what times work for you. You're getting to develop all of that before you are ever having to sit down to actually write a draft. So really getting those good, consistent reps in before you ever show up to first draft, so that by the time you get to first draft, you're like, okay, I know these are the times when I sit down for writing. I've already made a habit of showing up. Now I just have to sit down and do the draft. And that just takes down, like, there are all kinds of things that you will run into during your first draft. It makes consistency not one of those factors, right? Where it's like, you already have a practice, and so you're not asking the question, oh, did I not show up for long enough? Have I not, spent enough time on it? Or what? Like, it just gets rid of those questions. And then if you are running into problems, you can more easily pinpoint what those problems actually are, because consistency is no longer a factor. So those are like
Mhm.
two of our hot, big updates for how we're continuing to improve and grow the academy, as we get more students going through and helping more students write their first novel for the first time, which is so awesome. So I'm very excited about this.
Well, we need to make sure that we include a link in the episode or in the show notes so students can, I mean, so that listeners can go because they have a couple of weeks. How long does the enrollment period stay open?
Enrollment will stay open for a week. It opens the weekend of the 13th of June, and then will last until the following Sunday.
Okay, so then, but the great thing is, anytime that they hear this, because this, if you're an early listener, you can go ahead and go to the link and get on the wait list, so that you'll be notified as soon as things open. And also, you have an opportunity to just be on her email list anyway, so you won't miss it at all.
Yes, I absolutely, because our emails are always pretty juicy of like, we really like to get into like our technical skills and, busting writing myths and all of that good stuff. So the email list is not a bad place to be, if I do say so myself.
You're biased, so let me say it. Get on it. Oh, it's so awesome. There was something, one of the things that I love about what is happening, like as the academy is evolving, is sort of like double downing on like the main things are always the main things. It doesn't matter when technology changes. It doesn't matter whether it's your first book, your fifth book, your 10th book, starting to understand like what those consistent things are and how you operate in that arena. It really helps a lot with you pinpointing the things where you're not that good in,
Yeah.
or you need that additional help, or especially if you've been someone who has written several books and you keep finding that you sort of fumble in certain places, to begin to
Yeah.
identify what those are so that you can get additional help. So I really like that. And the fact that your students are sort of in there and they can do it again and again or continue that journey, it just makes it so it's like you get the consistency and you get the repetition,
Yeah.
and you're sort of getting more and more under your belt as you go through the process.
Yeah, and I think I've mentioned this before, but so the fellows, who are our graduates of Nav 101 and who can, who decide they want to stay, and we do super specific workshops and book clubs and stuff with them to continue developing those skills. But then they also show up for the lectures, and I think we've talked about this in a different episode. But what's so fun is like they went through it the first time, and then as they're going through it the second time, right? They'll be like, "Was that in the when you taught this the first time, was that there?" And I'll be like, yeah, it was there, right? And because what's happening is now that they have perspective, having been through it, they actually get something new out of going through the cohort again and again. Because it's like
Mm.
as you continue doing more projects, you get sort of like higher resolution. You pick up on different things. Your focus kind of like shifts as you're going through the steps of the process again, and you're getting clearer on your own process. And so they've been through Nav 101, they go through it again and they get brand new stuff out of it, even though I'm like, no, this is the same slide, it was there last time. And that's, I think, part of what makes the writing journey like so great, right? Because you're always learning new stuff and picking up new tidbits and learning new things about yourself and your process and getting better. And I think doing it in community is also makes it's more fun, gives you support when the first draft is annoying and you're like, oh, like I don't want to be here right now. And you've got people who are kind of going through it with you. And so being able to do it in that sort of like cohort style, so we all kind of move through the process together, I think is extra special. So those fundamentals sort of persist in being true your first,
Mhm.
fifth, 20th project.
Mhm. Yeah, and it helps you to do the thing that I, I honestly feel like we underestimate, and I don't think we outgrow, which is developing your intuition. and your
Yes.
understanding of how you like, we can say yes, this is creative, but it's still a process. It's a
Hmm.
creative process. Process is
Yes.
still process, right?
Yes.
Like I don't care how woo woo you are or how enlightened you are, or even sometimes like me, I feel like I'm very I feel like I'm almost like, I always feel like I almost have an engineer mind. And I think it's my legal brain, right? Of like how I like things to be structured. But even that flows into it. So when you're talking about having a consistent process, being able to apply it, being able to have times, dates when you need to be there and to get it done, it just goes a long way. So I'm excited for you. So y'all, if you have not done so already, go ahead, go to the show notes and make sure you click on the link, join the wait list or join. And what's really cool is like, you don't even already have to have an idea, right? You
Yeah.
just have to have the willingness and be ready to sign up because it's going to walk you through all of that.
Yeah, 100%. We start with where the heck do you grab an idea? And then when you have an idea, what do you do with it? Like, how do we go from I have this thing that might be cool to this is something I can turn into a plot? So it's really cool. It's really fun. And there are mind maps, there are visuals. We use colors and pens, and it's fun. So just
Of course, you would say mind maps. You just have to say that specifically.
it is like it's so funny because I have students who are like, I was familiar with mind maps. This is mind maps like I've never thought to use them before. So yeah, we use a lot of mind maps here. And
Listen, anytime we do it, because I always tell people I did when I was in law school, I went to this workshop and they called it whirly birds, and I always say like, I love a good whirly bird. You know what I mean? Just
it's so
bring it out.
good. Awesome. Well, so yes, so that's what's going on over here, but we have just our notes for this podcast episode. All of the podcast episodes are profound and full. So let's go ahead and dive right into it. We're going to be talking about the plot of Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So Dana, do you want to launch us in with a quick summary to get us oriented?
Yes, our notes runneth over, and this is the first time, but we are using the blurb that is given for the book because it just covers everything and trying our absolute best, as always, not to have spoilers. Oh my gosh, this book is really hard to do that with. So let's go ahead and dive in. Enter the brutal and elite world of a war college for dragon riders. 20-year-old Violet Soringale was supposed to enter the scribe quadrant, living a quiet life among books and history. Now, the commanding general, also known as her toughest Talon's mother, has ordered Violet to join the hundreds of candidates striving to become the elite of Navari, dragon riders. But when you're smaller than everyone else and your body is brittle, death is only a heartbeat away because dragons don't bond to fragile humans, they incinerate them. With fewer dragons willing to bond than cadets, most would kill Violet to better their own chances of success. The rest would kill her just for being her mother's daughter, like Zayden, the most powerful and ruthless wing leader in the Riders Quadrant. She'll need every edge her wits can give her just to see the next sunrise. Yet, with every day that passes, the war outside grows more deadly. The kingdom's protective wards are failing, and the death toll continues to rise. Even worse, Violet begins to suspect leadership is hiding a terrible secret. Friends, enemies, lovers, everyone at Hogwarts War College has an agenda because once you enter, there are only two ways out: graduate or die.
Dum bum bum.
Oh my
Um,
gosh.
that was my segue.
Right.
Bum, bum, bum.
Sound effects.
That is fully on brand for me. You've known me long enough to know. So to kick off our conversation about this story, do you want to hit me with some of the like overarching topics that you'd like to hit today? Make sure we cover.
Yes. First, can I please have the caveat of that? There is no way, no way that we can cover everything. And there are going to be some things that we feel like we are going to cover just because we must. If we must, we must. And so we'll probably repeat that every single episode, just so you know, we can't cover everything, but really trying to grab at some of the things that rise to the top, some of the things that stood out to us. And this book just had a lot to choose from. So when it comes to plot, the first thing that I want to kick off with is where she started this story. Right, she started right in the middle of everything. Like it kicks off moving, and it did a lot for setting the story up, setting up the world, and also sort of putting us in the thick of some of her most significant relationships. Also, one of the things that I feel like this plot does really well, which is the external events connect to something internal for Violet. It's almost like we're gonna see it both in plot and also in characters. It's almost like listen, y'all, I'm gonna call her Rebecca like we people. Hey, Rebecca. Look, like Rebecca sort of had like tentacles, if you will, when it came to the plot and also the characters and how that sort of connected back to Violet. And it's really helpful when you have a plot that has so many layers, and then when we get to characters, having a fairly nice sized cast. And so we will talk about that, and we'll go down a couple of, I think, rabbit trails there. The other thing that I want to talk about is I think this story does a great job at open loops.
Mm-hmm.
I love a good open loop. You know, having a good open loop where it sort of gives us a sense of curiosity and makes us wonder what's coming next, and it sort of pulls us further into the story, and in this case pulls us further into the series. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then the last thing that I have, other than I'm sure we'll talk about other things, is remembering that this is a book one. And we've talked about this on previous episodes, but remembering that, you know, a book one tends to be tight, right? The bubble is smaller so that we get an understanding and sort of get grounded in where we are before the world sort of expands as you move through this series. So I just had that down that we may want to mention because it's significant in this story. What about you?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the big topics I want to cover is going to be talking about the academic settings. So, academic settings are especially they're well loved really across genres, but they are very well loved in the fantasy genre in particular. And so, I want to talk about this particular one and sort of a couple different ways that academic settings will generally function and what to be aware of when you're in an academic setting. And then we're also going to take the opportunity to offer, because this, so first, this is a crossover pick, and it's a crossover pick of fantasy and romance. So we're going to take at least a minute just to talk a little bit about my perspective as a fantasy, like an editor who works with fantasy writers, and then kind of pick your brain a little bit as an editor who works with romance writers as well. Just to kind of cover, because this one is, you know, this is romantasy, and we're really looking to blend, like, we're hitting two sort of separate genres here, sort of fantasy, action, adventure, and then romance, to kind of give those at least a little bit of an individual treatment since they're both present within the book. So to get us started, to get us started off, do we want to go ahead and start by talking about the beginning of the book? That seems like the beginning seems like a good place to start.
Well, listen, I'm down. This story kicks off with Violet, and it's already said it in the blurb, where she is going into Dragon Rider's quadrant when she thought she was going to be a scribe. And this is something that she knew her whole life. And because of circumstances, and again, we are aiming to not have spoilers, because of circumstances, she is going to the Dragon Riders quadrant, and she is not an ideal candidate. But it's not just that, right? Because that alone would have been a lot. But the fact that a lot of the tension around the decision is so close to her and is with her general mother. And listen, y'all, for the record, me and her mom can have a whole long talk because I don't know what her mama is thinking. Not her mother, her mama. I don't know what her mama thinking. However, so immediately you're sort of dropped into this big world, which you get with fantasy, but it turns on intimate relationships. This is a mother and a daughter. And so much has happened, and we don't know because this is like the first page, right?
Yeah,
It's the
literally
first
the
five
first
pages.
page.
Yeah, you're like, wait, what? What happened to her dad, and what happened to her brother and her sister, and there's something about starting in the middle of action that sort of pulls us in because we don't know, and then being very selective as to what you reveal so that we begin to have some of what we'll talk a little bit about later, those open loops, and it can begin to make us care about Violet and what she's going through and see her sort of lugging this rucksack and that it feels like we can't see it, but I feel like we can. It's 10, 20, 30 pounds bigger than her. It reminds me when I went to basic training. Like, who signed us up for these big ass bags? Part of my French, right? Like, that's how I felt. And you had to take them everywhere and you couldn't complain. So I felt that for her. And it seemed like the best possible situation to set up like an underdog sort of tale.
Yeah.
And I think it set us up really well. And so I think this is one of those times where it orients us. It was engaging. We had conflict. We understood the beginning of the stakes, and not just for her as an individual, but getting a sneak peek into what is going on in this world. And so I think she did a great job for that, both in sense of this book and setting us up for whatever is to come with this series.
Yeah, it's we launch into the story and out the gate, right? It's there's this argument going on between her mom and her sister, and in the course of that argument, right, it's telling us something about like it's literally telling us the entire setup basically of like why would you send her to do this, it's super dangerous, she's gonna die, she's weaker than everybody else, and then and then getting some of that internal stuff from Violet being like wow, thanks for the vote of confidence, and but all of this is like this is the kind of the crux of the conflict of the story. So basically it is immediately telling you this is what the story is going to be about. Dragon Rider Academy, super dangerous, probably gonna die. Also, Violet is she breaks easy. Like, Violet is ill-equipped to be the kind of person to do this kind of thing. Out the gate, like, now we know. And then we launch very quickly into, parapet and all of the things that are involved in getting into the academy. And these are the kinds of things that you really are, you want to weigh when you're opening a story, right? Of like, how much information do we need in order for the inciting incident to make sense and to be meaningful to us as an inciting incident? And in this one, right, she was able to kind of like pack everything in immediately so that in the course of that argument, we're like, cool, she wasn't planning on going to the academy. She's not prepared. It's super dangerous. We understand why this inciting incident is a problem. And so then we're ready to launch straight into the story. And that's kind of one of the metrics I like to use for evaluating how much do we need before we get to that inciting incident. And she kind of was able to get it all in at once and then send us off to the races.
And I like that metric. I also like to include that you want it to almost be a no-brainer, right? Like because you don't have forever to set this up. And the more you can take advantage of the momentum, the better off you are. And the more grace we give you as a reader to give you some wiggle room and some breathing room. Like we give you 50 feet.
Yeah.
We let you then begin because we're like, okay, I'm down. I like those stakes. Okay. Because all of this feels like, okay, why is she even here? And if that question is big enough and it's significant enough, it's going to carry us forward. And I think she just does a great job of setting that up. And we get all the other stuff that just makes it yummy, like her characteristics, her sass, the fact that all the odds are against her. And even later on, like the odds that are for her, she doesn't quite realize that that is a skill, like that's a gift that she can use, and we see it, and so it just builds from there. Definitely.
Yeah, and it's one of those things where we like have I think this is somehow the best analogy I have, so we're going with it. It's sort of like if you've ever ridden a roller coaster that has, so there's some roller coasters that start slow, right, and they kind of like, and then they like kind of take you toward like your first drop, and then they speed up. Then there are other roller coasters which I discovered this as a child, where you get in and it has a certain name, but it's like they like rocket launch you, right? Like it starts immediately and it goes like, and it just, you start going at like, you go like 0 to 100. I don't know. 100 is probably pretty fast. I don't know. But like you go really, really fast immediately. And you sort of are choosing between those, right? And so when you kind of get us going, then you sort of make up that time on the back end of getting us caught up on other aspects of the story. And so like with all things, you're sort of measuring those trade-offs and picking the one that sort of serves your story best.
Well, yeah, and I want to add to that too. I think, and we've talked about this before, as like being mindful of like if you come out the gate at 100, that's the baseline. So that's the other part of this, right? Like, right. I always think you can scream if you want to go. Listen, they're gonna be screaming the whole way if it's 100 on page 1. So you also want to be mindful of it. And you don't necessarily want to pull back because it's the baseline now, but you do want to be aware of that. And I think that's something else that's significant to say about the story as well.
Yeah, and that's actually a really great segue into the academic setting. You set me up perfect. You set me up so I can spike it.
Swish.
So when you're using an academic setting, there's sort of two ways you can play it. One is where the school itself is kind of the antagonist, in that there's an inherent external structure to the story because the experience of the academy centers on the challenges that you have to go through, right? And so what that does is it gives you sort of that, it kind of builds in that structure of exactly what you were talking about, Dana, where it's like, okay, we have to build progressively, like those challenges have to progressively escalate, which is essentially what we get in this story. So all of the challenges are you might die, how you might die, and the number of ways you can die increase. So parapet, you just got to walk across the thing. Now it's dangerous and it's slippery and whatever, there's wind and stuff.
And it's raining.
And it's raining. Slick. But you do just have to get across. As you go through the academy, the challenges get more intense and more extreme. And so that's one of the ways you can use like an academic setting where it has that built-in structure of the trials that you will go through, that then have that, they should have the inherent escalation, right? Where those trials get more difficult, more dangerous, etc. On the flip side, you may have an academic setting that is, it is the setting and the external conflict is centered on something else. So a good example of this for stories that we've had before on the podcast would be Ninth House. The story of Ninth House is not about Alex overcoming the trials, the 3 specific trials in order to graduate Lethe. Alex is already in Lethe, and there is a different external conflict that's centered on something else. It's centered on this murder mystery. The academic setting is still an antagonist, right? I mean, Yale still causes her problems. Lethe still causes her problems. So it's still going to function as a force of conflict in the environment, but that external action, that primary external conflict is centered somewhere else. And those are usually the two kind of different ways that you'll see an academic setting getting used. And Fourth Wing is very much inside of that first and springboarding into the remainder of the series.
Now, I would say, and I didn't say this earlier, and I'm sure I probably say it in characters, but I'm not a fan of stories with new college or young adults per se. I'm like, listen, I'm not trying to hear be inside the head of a 20-year-old. Okay. That was a long time ago. Okay. But I think here she really uses it as a pressure cooker. Right. So yes, we do get the fact that the environment it causes those stakes to escalate, and the fact that it it's really just the entry point into going off to this ongoing war and the situation that they find themselves in general. Is sort of just, it's like this, honestly, it's just a true pressure cooker. And I honestly feel like she does that well. There's some things I could do without, but it's done well for the environment. And it is a college. It's an academic environment, and it's a part of how she interacts with herself, how she interacts with her fellow students and the friends that she makes, how she interacts with her family, and the expectations for each one of those, and against her expectations for herself. And so, yeah, definitely.
Yeah, and the last thing I just kind of like tack on to that as well is, if you are if you are writing a story in this kind of setting, you do want to know, and even if it's not till after you've written your first draft and you're like, I see, right, the truth of the story. You do want to know, though, which type of academic setting you're using, because if there's baked in challenges where, again, the goal of the story is to basically survive or get through the academy, then you know that you need specific challenges, specific stuff that are going to escalate. But if you're like, I'm just setting it in an academic setting, and the conflict is not specifically focused on and inherent to the academic setting, then that lets you know that you're going to need some kind of other external conflict, so your story doesn't get lost just being like, follow my protagonist while they go to school, like that's probably not ideal. And so again, this one is a good example. I think she used the academy to good effect of giving us that mix of so the challenges themselves are kind of like those checkpoints as we're moving through the plot. And then, but when you're doing something like that, it also means that you need in between stuff. So you need to populate in between of, we're preparing for the challenges, we're training. There should be usually other forces of antagonism coming in. So rivals, enemies, all of those different forces of antagonism, which she pulls in, right? So she's got people who do not like her, people who are trying to kill her. You've got Xaden, who's got a chip on his shoulder. And so really, right, you're kind of populating that space in between the challenges, and then using those other forces of antagonism to turn up the heat on the individual challenges.
All while, which I think she does a great job of this, all while not taking your eyes off of the fact that this isn't a bubble, right? Like, everything that is sort of going on here, she does a great job of reminding us, why Xaden has a chip on his shoulder concerning her, what things are going on while you're in this sort of game sort of situation, that there is real life stakes going on right now as we speak. And then at all times, it sort of segues us into the next point that I have, which is you start seeing those external events when it comes to how she sets the story up, sort of demanding things of Violet internally. And this is where I think some writers can do this not so good for me, because it can make the character seem whiny. So you got to be careful, but also, having the underdog, I'm smaller than everyone, I'm weak, or I'm clumsy, or, the things can feel cliche. Here we do have this opportunity to see where she's starting to connect a lot of this, right? Violet's understanding of their history, right? Violet's understanding, because of the way that she was trained, of what their circumstances are, not just a sense of brute force, but on the bigger picture of what's going on around them, or the lack thereof. So all the while she's navigating this foreign environment where she just didn't think, she's familiar with it because everybody is, but she never thought that she would be here. And as she's aiming to navigate it, it's orienting us too. And so I think she did a really good job of that. Y'all, listen, even as somebody who ex-military, a lot of this, I'll be like, listen, after you done been through some things, you don't want to be a part of some things. So again, there's certain parts of it I just wouldn't pick. However, here I think it was a really great opportunity to almost have Violet being isolated and being forced into deciding who are you going to become. And that is great matter for a story,
Yeah.
right? Of like everything is asking her, who are you going to become? The relationship that she had with her father, the relationship she had with her brother, the relationship she had with her sister, like that would have been enough on its own. And now being thrust in this situation, targets on your back, and you're just she has no choice. She can't just survive, maybe like some other kids would do in those scenarios. And so I think when it comes to plot, I would say backing out and understanding when we talk about that escalation, like what is every one of those battles, those tests, every dragon selection, like what does that, like how does that connect to the journey that you are taking that protagonist on? And we'll talk more about, characters later, but that is the setup of how this story is plotted. And this is how we navigate this entire story. And it also makes it so that, y'all, I'm trying to figure out how to say this the nice way. I think it also set it up to where there were some not so good moments in that, depending on the type of reader you are when you come to this story, because a lot of the external things, including some of the magic, is connected to internal things and to dragons. Listen, I've been around Rachel long enough to know that it was way too squishy, even for me.
Proud. I'm so proud. I'm so happy. For Dana to complain about a magic system, I'm like, yes, we've officially arrived.
I was just like, wait a minute. And so, before we start talking about why I think it's squishy, I would love for Rachel to sort of just like, let me just small little caveat. I work with authors who do romantasy, who do romantic fantasy, who do paranormal romance. But there is something to be said by really reading real full-blown fantasy novels and bringing in that concrete structure, especially when you say this is a romantasy, because it means you have the responsibility of the romance and the fantasy. And so understanding this, it feels like something you can just select, but with that selection comes follow through.
Mm-hmm.
And I think sometimes it got a little too squishy, and I think shoring that up would have been able to make this a really strong dynamic of the story, and I don't think it got there. Not for me, not in this book. So if you could a little bit, please.
Yeah. Oh, oh man, we're like right inside my like territory.
She's like, with pleasure.
So quick refresher, right? When we think about magic system, and this is something that I was first introduced to by Brandon Sanderson in his creative writing course, is hard versus soft magic as sort of a spectrum of magic systems. And the only reason that this spectrum, the only reason we care about this spectrum is because it helps us position how we want our magic to function in the world. So a hard magic system is going to have very hard and fast rules that are very clear cut, that are very well established with a very clear sort of cause and effect relationship, so that the audience and the characters can recognize like these are the rules of how these things work. Here's the how this magic works, the relative pros and cons, and then those rules are fairly set. And the challenge becomes solving problems when those are your constraints. And everything is going to fall on a spectrum, right? It's not like, oh, I have a hard or I have a soft. You're probably going to be somewhere, along the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
A soft magic system is going to be something that's a little more open-ended, a little more mysterious. The rules are not quite as clear cut. And the benefit of that is that it can feel it feels very magical, right? It feels like, oh, you kind of don't know what's going to happen next. But it also means that it can be sort of without any kind of constraint. And when your magic is without constraint, without any relative negative effects or any kind of rules governing it, it actually undermines its efficacy in the story. Because all of a sudden, it starts to function like Deus Ex Machina, where it's like, oh, like surprise, right? Like something sweeps out of left field and it's like, oh, it's fine, we can solve any problem because magic is so powerful, we can pull out anything at any time. And so we don't really buy the magic as having any kind of stakes or any real meaning. And it not only undermines our relationship to the magic, it can undermine the stakes of the entire story, right? Because it's like,
Mm-hmm.
oh well, this person has this power, they can solve any problem because there are no apparent constraints on it. And so when your magic is too squishy, and I do think we have a problem with that in this story, that it feels almost random. It's like, okay, all
Mm-hmm.
dragon riders can do this sort of weird miscellany of things, but then they also have a super, like, they have a specific ability connected to their dragon. But because that's not outlined in any kind of specificity, there's basically no rules for like any dragon. So like if you need an ability, you can kind of pull it out and be like, that's because there's this other kind of dragon, right? You can always kind of like just hoo ha, and just like keep pulling them out again with no limitations. And the limitations on magic are a part of what makes the story fun. Like the
Mm-hmm.
magic being able to do anything is not actually the cool part. It's operating within constraints and utilizing what you do know, or navigating the unpredictability of magic. That is what really makes it like work in service of the story rather than feel like, honestly, like a pass in the plot, right? Like this is your like a get out of your fight with the antagonist free card because it's the super secret special sauce power.
Mm-hmm. I, I'm I have a lot that I can say about it, but we still have a time limit. Okay, so I will say this. I prefer when I'm working with clients that this is concrete, that you understand where you're taking this and what those parameters are, because there's nothing like knowing that there is this guardrail and something is coming up and me as a reader saying, oh, how are they going to get around that? Why?
Yeah.
Because I know it's there.
Mm-hmm.
And I think here it would just pop up. Like one time something popped up. I'm like, what, is their air condition broke? Like I didn't know what was going on. And I feel like whenever you do have that sense of concrete knowing of how you're navigating it, it gives you an opportunity here when you have this dual genre that
Mm-hmm.
you can expand your audience. Because if you have someone who is a real fantasy reader, and nowadays I think you can say real fantasy reader, because some of this can say it's fantasy and it's just like, you just want to throw some magic on there, right? And it's okay. And I think in some spaces it being squishy is not thought of as a ding. And I'll give an example like PNR. PNR can have magic in it, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's not the same thing as you saying you have a fantasy.
Mm-hmm.
Readers automatically in their mind, when you say a fantasy, they are already thinking about worlds and rules and different types of magic. And they're thinking about the type of magic that they've encountered before. Oh, I wonder if they have this kind of magic or that kind of magic, right? It becomes this thing. And I was telling Rachel in our pre-show sort of notes, I was like, it always reminds me of when people got so upset about Twilight. Y'all always talk about Twilight because Twilight's one of my favorite books, so don't even say nothing about it. Okay. It's like when people's like sparkling vampires, right? Like everything, you either was for it or against it. But it's like one of those moments, right? It's like nobody, like we never had to justify why they were sparkling. Because you was fantasy. Stephanie could just say, my vampire sparkle, shut up, take it or leave it. Right? But if you are doing, like, if you are saying this is a fantasy, we don't get a pass because it's a romantasy. We
Yeah.
don't get a pass, right? So I would say being very solid and secure in that, knowing whether it's a hard or a soft, or understanding the dynamics when it comes to the dragon. We knew for sure that there was aspects that connected the dragon to the dragon's rider, but that wasn't even fully concrete because it was saying some of the dragon's skill magic went to the human,
Mm-hmm.
and no one said what the sum, like what that distinction was,
Yeah.
which gave room for some other things, but
Mm-hmm.
that's what makes it squishy. Because how do we
Yeah.
know it applies and then Is it just random, or are you just pulling it out of your pocket? And I think you can lose more people than you can gain if they're already very versed in that genre. Now, and if you have a newer reader or a young reader base, like I would assign with romantasy, you can get away with it because they haven't read enough in the genre to be able to say anything different. And so this is where I strongly suggest writers be very intentional about your reading. And we definitely can always talk about that more. But with that said, was there anything else you want to add to that before I move on to the other point that I had?
No, I just want to like kind of like highlight something of like really what this comes down to, and something we talked about extensively during the pre-show, is when you are doing two genres, you are like, you want to do justice to both of those genres. And so romantasy is a perfectly great genre, and there's not, there's a lot of weird conversation around like romantasy is like there's all these things, and there's, I don't know, people are always arguing about something about books, and I'm like, oh, stop. It's too much. But the point here is about doing justice to both of your genres, right? And so it's just giving the intentional treatment to the fantasy the same way you want to give the intentional treatment to the romance aspect, the same way you want to give intentional treatment to your plot. Like it's, and like you said, this is an opportunity to broaden your audience, where like lots of people can love and enjoy this book, where we get, our romance is firing on all cylinders, but also like the fantasy is interesting and working. And you have an opportunity there to really serve a wide reader base by being intentional about both. And that's really what we're getting at with a conversation about a book like Fourth Wing. Did you want to go ahead? You can dive into your points. You want to make maybe any notes about romance as well?
Well, I think we kind of already said it. I think the biggest part here, I wouldn't even say do justice. I think it should be equal. We don't want to do justice. You want to do it. If you're not going to do it, just leave it as a subplot, and it's okay. And so I think when it comes to romance, is ensuring that when you have something where you would have the same thing as with a romantic suspense, right? You are needing to have the full spectrum of the progression of the relationship. And in this story, I think it's there. It could feel a little bit weak in some parts, but I think it's because the action part of it sort of took over, and we can't forget that at the end of the day, this is still a romance. And I think it was almost like, oh, I see the end in sight. Let's hurry up and do all the things before we get there. And I sort of felt that probably for about the last third or so of the story. And so I would say making sure that you are versed when it comes to the scenes and the beats that are necessary to have a full romance. That it's not. This is when I could go into the distinction, to me, the difference between a love story and a romance. If it's meant to be a true romance, making sure that you have that progression. And in this story, I feel like she did a great job when it came to the enemies aspect, that there was a real core reason of why there was distrust there. I loved the way she handled the love triangle. I love how she handled the dynamic of the good guy, bad guy, and why one or the other may feel good for her or not, and how that distinction is being determined based on where Violet is and who Violet wants to be and who she's aiming to be as she's trying to figure that out. And I think that was done really nicely. It almost feels like the slow progression that she had at the beginning of the story was sort of ate up by the rushing of it in the last part. But I think that's probably why I gave a pass at the end, because we did get to slow down in the beginning of the slow burn of it. The last part that I'm going to say about it here is like, all things are not covered over with sex. Like, newsflash. Like, listen,
Dana Pittman, who loves some good old fashioned chandelier swinging, is here to tell you that sex is not going to paper over everything.
Listen, just because you blow the windows out, right? Like, I just felt like some of that was like, okay, now you're doing too much. Okay, whatever. It keeps people reading. It keeps people doing TikToks about it. I guess that's what it is. But here's what I would say more than anything. Look, listen, I'm all for a good steamy scene. But if you're able to get the undercurrent right, everything else is gravy.
Yeah.
And I think that's the part that sometimes was missed, right? Yeah. Those hit or misses when it came to the relationship aspect, where they were leaning in or pulling back. Some of the conversations that should have been had so that when things did go wrong, they landed. I think those were the moments that we missed out on. And I would have taken you fixing that to blowing out more windows and trying to figure out why the headboard broke. You know what I'm saying? Like, first of all, I just want to remind us that these kids are in college. Okay. I'm just like, what are y'all doing? Y'all listen, y'all, I got married young, so just blame it on that. Okay. But the point is, I just feel like a lot of that was like, okay, you don't seem too much. But here's always where I like to lean in and challenge, just like what we said with the fantasy, with the romance. Nail all of the stuff that you got to have there, then go.
Yeah.
Don't try to just like do some wazzle dazzle, sprinkle some pixie dust, and then forget all this other stuff. Because the reality is it comes back and it bites you when you don't realize it. And that's what happened in a couple of scenes here. And we can't tell everything without spoiling it.
Yeah.
But I this is where I would say more than anything, that, and I think this will wrap up everything, like kind of like what we wanted to talk about. But I think more than anything, this is why your reading list is so important. Yeah. I would even dare say that you have a fantasy reading list, you have a romance reading list, and then you have romantasy. Romantasy is such a new audience, and there are certain ways that you can go about reading in it. But if you were to take this as being it, you may lead yourself down a wrong path. It is good. Don't get me wrong. The audiobook was hidden. Now, there are some other things that we're going to talk about, but I feel like based on our audience and what we talk about, it is so important for you to know the difference between what's a convention and what's obligatory when it comes to that genre, and what was just because this is for giggles and grins. Because giggles and grins won't get you there. Now, listen, the fact that you had these other mass audiences and that it blew up is a great thing. But what I always tell my clients, we always want somebody to blow up. Blow up, girl, blow up.
Yeah.
But I would like for you to always write a story that's going to have long legs. That will be good 5 years from now, 10 years from now, that you don't need somebody talking about it on, a social media channel to make it feel relevant. And I don't think that this story will need that to feel relevant, but I do think that I would question over time, and this will be the last thing I say about it. I would question over time whether you would be able to sustain readers with this book who are well versed and read a lot. Versus new readers to romantasy. I think you would have issues. I think the great thing about it is if you connect with Violet, and Xaden was great. Dane was very interesting. The characters and the dynamic was very interesting to where you had enough going on to get us. But what I feel like it's a repeat read, that kind of thing.
Yeah.
And those little things that we're talking about, continuing the progression, the intimacy progression, and making sure that's locked in, understanding the magic system and really locking that in. I would even say, we're going to talk about some other things later that goes into the writing, but there's a lot of things that feel small, but they have to be very intentional. And I think this sort of skates over it because it does have a freshness about it, and it has enough hype around it.
Yeah.
And I think that's where some of those other things that may be fundamental, you'll kind of get them a pass.
Yeah. Yeah. But, and I think that just goes back to the importance of why having a broad reading list is so important, because it's like, Fourth Wing brought romantasy, even though romantic fantasy has existed at least a decade before Fourth Wing came out. It brought romantasy in kind of a fresh way. We brought dragons and academy, right? Very beloved things in fantasy, and then paired it with like a strong with romance and steamy, and which a lot of people got to experience for the first time. And so you got that, so you can kind of get that pass for freshness. But that now that that's been done, now that it's established, someone who's listening to this, your book will probably not get the same pass. And that's why we even take the time to highlight these things out of the book, because it's like, if you want to write something like Fourth Wing, if you are inspired by Fourth Wing, that's amazing. Like, write romantasy, but know that, like, especially as the genre continues to develop, you're going into a genre now that where there's competition, there's more books, and like you want to give yourself the strongest possible footing in the genre that you can. And so only reading Fourth Wing and thinking like these are the rules of romantasy, right, that would be a misstep. And especially now, again, as romantasy has continued to develop, there's a lot more happening in the space. And so understanding your genre and then understanding its component genres actually will give you a leg up over like it, right in the genre. By being well versed in both fantasy and romance, you will come out firing on all cylinders, and you can kick a lot of butt that way. And so that's why we bring these things up. And I think that's
Yeah. I would even say over time, I mean, I love having conversations like this, like genre merging, the origins of genre, how they've evolved over time, how they've changed and shifted. That's my jam. But I would say, if you let Dana tell it, y'all listen, you might not let Dana tell it. You know what I'm saying? You can do whatever you want to do. You're grown. You know what I'm saying? Look, what? You're grown. But I would say this is getting to the point where romantasy and romantic fantasy will be different.
Yeah.
It will be different. It is an audience difference. Yeah. And in that audience difference, it really affects your wiggle room. I think that's what you are really. And so, and it's not picking one or the other, but I do think it is about a skill set and understanding with that skill set as a writer. It is going to help you with identifying what you need to know and to acquire, and what's going to be a part of your plotting and your writing process, and working with your team or your editor to ensure that that is what lands on the page.
Yeah. Yeah. And it comes back, right? We say this like literally every book, every time. It's pretty much always the thing that we say, right? But this is so much about knowing your audience. Like, who are you wanting to attract? Who do you want to read your book? Being very clear about that, so that, again, you're picking your comps with intention. You are marketing with intention, so that the people who are going to love your book find your book and enjoy it, and you don't have a misstep where you attract the wrong people and they hate your book, not because there's something wrong with your book, but because it's a mismatch of audience, right? You don't want that. And so this is one of those things that comes into, again, knowing your audience, knowing who you're writing for, and where you're trying to land in the market as well.
Yeah, and we have more episodes that's going to go with this particular book. I also feel like as we get ready to round out this discussion, we do have other books that can be helpful, even though they're not romantasy. But I think there are a great understanding of how you can have, for example, that suspension of belief without moving into fantasy. When you think about Sookie Stackhouse, when you think about we read Sin and Chocolate, even Sin and Magic, right? Like, so you could begin to, if you're following along with us, starting to make some comparisons and how things were set up and what the stakes were and how the transformation of those characters took place across the story, so that you start orienting your mind to some of those similarities and some of those differences, and to begin to ask yourself the questions as a writer, which way do I lean? And it may be that you want to lean more into something else, and it may be that you need to have more skills that you need to acquire to be able to lean into that. But I think that's just a great place to start.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Is there any last points you want to make sure we cover before we wrap our episode for the day?
No, girl, if I say anything else, we're going to be here till next week. So no.
I know. Our notes are just pages and pages and pages long.
They are.
There's so much conversation to be had here, but fortunately, we still have 2 more episodes left to go. So next week, we are going to be talking about characters in Fourth Wing by Rebecca Yarros. So, stay tuned until then. Don't forget to check us out at storydeepdive.com. Give this video a like. Be sure to follow us on YouTube or on your preferred podcasting app so that you always know when new episodes come out. Spoiler alert, they come out on Sundays. Also, leave us a rating and review, and leave us a comment. Let us know your perspective on Fourth Wing. If you have questions about our conversation surrounding Fourth Wing, please leave us a comment, and we would love to, address some of those questions and have more conversation about this in a bonus episode. So we will be coming back at you same time, same place next week. We will talk about characters, and we will look forward to seeing you then. But until then, as always, happy writing.